Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. It's time for another installment of my Question the Narrative series. And today's video is actually piggybacking off of the one that I did last week when I talked about underground cities, because it led me on some rabbit trails of underground tunnels. So many people told me about underground tunnels and cities in the comments of that video, so I had a lot of fun reading about that stuff. And it really started me thinking about underground tunnels and the Inheritors. Now, before I get started in that, though, I do want to just make a few comments about my Tartaria and Millennial Reign videos, because I did a couple of them because I found the theory completely fascinating, and I found what I believed was a lot of great evidence to support that it possibly already happened. Now, I mentioned in one of those videos that I have been praying for discernment because I do not want to mislead anybody. And the more that I'm praying about that and the more that I'm thinking about it, I'm really starting to have some reservations about it. And I'm going to tell you why. Now, I've read this verse so many times, and you would think that I would have applied it to what was to the whole theory behind the millennial reign and Tartaria. And for some reason, I just wrote it off. And I think that maybe it was just because the idea that the millennial reign already happened and that we might be living in the short season right now, it is very, it's so interesting. It's so fascinating. But the fact is that we've also got to read what God's word tells us. And this is 2 Timothy 2:18, and it's talking about Hymenaeus and Philetus. And it says, Hymenaeus and Philetus, that's who it's talking about, who have swerved from the truth, saying that the resurrection has already happened. They are upsetting the faith of some. And I think the way that I wrote that off was I was just saying, well, at some point the resurrection is going to happen, and that we were going to be able to say that the resurrection already happened. But this verse just really started standing out to me, that they're talking about people swerving from the truth, saying that the resurrection had already happened. And then I remembered Ecclesiastes 1:9, which says, what has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. And then lastly, I had one more verse that I wanted to share with you. 2 Timothy 4:3 tells us, for the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. And is that what was going on? Is it telling us what we want to hear? I think that I could be wrong and it could have happened, but as of right now, through prayer and through me contemplating this, I think that the idea would make a great fiction novel. But at this point, I'm not really comfortable saying that I'm leaning towards the fact that it could be the truth. Now, another reason that I was kind of having issues with this is because Revelation tells us in detail what is going to happen over the 7 years of tribulation. So it covers 7 years in detail. And yet nothing is written about the short season. So we were speculating that the short season could last maybe 200 years, possibly 250 years. And my issue as I think about it is, if it was such an extended period of time, and if there is so much going on, why is there no direction for those who would be living in that time period if it really was that long? Why spend so much time in Revelation to tell us about 7 years of tribulation and then tell us hardly anything at all about the short season? So, and lastly, the last thing that really I've been having issues with is, imagine how many resurrections that would take then, because there's, first of all, the Gospels tell us that the dead were raised when Jesus died on the cross, and then we have Jesus coming back and the saints are raised and they go to rule with him. And then after, it tells us that after the 1,000 years that the rest of the dead are raised. But then after Gog and Magog, and after Satan is vanquished and thrown into the fiery pit, there would then have to be yet another resurrection of the people who died during that short season. And to me, that feels like we're really adding to God's word, and we are warned not to do that. So at this point in time, that is where I'm at with this. And I know that people are going to disagree with me on that, but really this is the point that I've reached just through prayer and through contemplation. It was not sitting right with me. It was really weighing heavy on my heart, and I had to say it. Now, though, let's move on to the actual topic of underground tunnels and the Inheritors. So I mentioned that last week's video was about underground cities, and it really kind of dovetailed into me looking into underground tunnels too, because as a lot of you know from some of my other videos about where I live, there are underground tunnels underneath where I'm sitting right now. They go underneath the whole town. And the fact is that there are tunnels behind, I would say, a good portion of cities and towns, not just here, but around the world. So I just wanted to show you some examples, and this is just something that is fun to look into. And believe me, I am going somewhere with this, but here is underneath the streets of Buffalo, and it tells us the Lockport Caves are man-made caves and tunnels which were built at the beginning of progress on the Erie Canal, dating back to the early 1800s. Travel to Lockport and travel back in time as you embark on 70-minute guided tours of the caves. And let's just skip down. Recently rehabilitated from their original construction from 1838. So we've got some underground tunnels and caves, man-made, underneath Buffalo. There's just some pictures. And like I always do, I will leave links. That looks very creepy. So there's that. And next, now this is very interesting. These are tunnels underneath Traverse City State Hospital and Traverse City State Hospital. This is a lunatic asylum, and these are tunnels that are underneath it. And from my understanding, it is actually very common to have tunnels underneath lunatic asylums. And these are just some photos of the ones underneath there. And here is a picture of what Traverse City State Hospital looks like. And I did talk about that in one of my other videos where I was discussing lunatic asylums and a possible use for them. Here we have a rare look at the tunnels under San Francisco. And there they are. And I encourage you, just Google the name of your town or a city that's close to you and see if you have anything underneath you, because you'd be surprised at the number of tunnels that you will find underneath cities. And they give a lot of very mundane explanations, and most of them are probably true. They're old abandoned sewer tunnels. Some of them are abandoned subway tunnels, abandoned trains. Some of them, like I believe it was the first one that I showed you, it said that it was what was it? The people who made the illegal alcohol. Is that bootleggers? You would think that I would know this, but I don't. Anyway, so yeah, so that's what it says that one was about. But anyway, where was I at? San Francisco. Okay, so here we have Sydney has abandoned rail tunnels. So of course this is in Australia. And I'm not going to go all night to showing you all the tunnels everywhere, because that's just one of those things that almost seems never ending. This here is the one in my town, and I just highlighted this here. It says, it was equipped with pushcart tracks like those in an old coal mine, and the tunnel stretched under the streets of Slatington. I vaguely remember my grandmother telling me that a lot of the houses in town had doors in their basements by which they could access these tunnels, which might have been how many of the slate workers went to and from their jobs every day. So yeah, even my little town has tunnels underneath underneath our very feet. I actually have the cave underneath my house. And here is another one that's also in Pennsylvania. And beneath the surface, the mundane hides the mystery. And here it says, I used to think Lehigh Valley was dull, and for years I was convinced that Nazareth was about the dullest place in it. Then I began to look beneath the surface. I began to ask around about what I thought were false rumors of tunnels under the streets in Nazareth. To my surprise, older people who had grown up there swore that the tunnels existed. Some said they'd been in them. So further down, you find out that there were indeed tunnels there. And I just thought that it was interesting how here it said, so now either the MHS, which is the Moravian Historical Society, who says there are no tunnels, that's another thing to really think about, is that the Historical Society is claiming that there's no tunnels, and I think a lot of times that's a red flag. So anyway, so now either the MHS is wrong and there are mysterious tunnels under Nazareth, or we have an equally interesting phenomenon with elders of the town having widespread false memories or hallucinations of being in tunnels that don't exist. So yeah, that is something else that I find really interesting, that we have the Historical Society here saying that they don't exist, but we have elders in the town that are saying that they were there. And if they're not correct, they could be false memories or hallucinations of being in tunnels. And even if that is true, that in itself is something that I think would be neat to look into. But I think, let me see. That's what it's called. I said bootleggers before. Oh my gosh, it was moonshiners. You can tell that I don't really get into that stuff, but massive network of moonshiner tunnels discovered under the Smoky Mountains. And so, yeah, so they found these under the Smokies. Here we go. And it says the archaeologists found that the tunnel extends for roughly 5.7 miles. So anyway, yeah, you're going to find stories of tunnels all over the world. And there's a lot of speculation about what goes on in these tunnels, that these tunnels are used today for a lot of nefarious reasons. And that was one thing that got me thinking about the Inheritors, because I happened to come across a story of a hotel called the Greenbrier Hotel. It was actually a video that I came across on YouTube of somebody taking a tour. So the Greenbrier Hotel is a luxury hotel in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, and it actually has a military bunker there. It says the secret government bunker hidden under a luxury hotel stocked with 30 years of supplies to keep America's most influential alive in a nuclear fallout. And so I watched this tour, and I found one thing that the tour guide said very interesting. She said that they kept a very large stock of antidepressants there. And that to me just got me thinking. I mean, I'm sure that if you would have to live underground in a bunker for an extended period of time, that might be necessary for some people. But it also made me wonder if there could have been a link between the bunkers and maybe the lunatic asylums and here's where my story started to kind of veer off. What if something like these bunkers have been used in the past? The Greenbrier bunker is no joke, too. Like, they even have, I don't know if you can see it here. It actually showed in the tour that they have a huge background, like a mural of the Capitol building, so that if the president has to address the nation from this bunker, they think that seeing the Capitol in the background will help to alleviate the fears of the people watching the broadcast. And now, from what I understand, that they sometimes even hold receptions in this bunker now. I'm assuming that would be the kitchen, and this would be where the people would eat at. But yeah, they kept enough supplies here for 30 years, and I believe that they said it was enough for 1,100 people. And like they said, it would be the elite. It would be the chosen ones who were brought into this bunker. So if you live around there, I would encourage you to go take a tour. I think that that would be fascinating. Now, shortly after I found out about the Greenbrier Hotel, I was reminded of a place called Mount Weather. Mount Weather is a top secret government facility not activated. It's a top, you can tell that I'm tired, top secret government facility. And that's just the headline there. But Mount Weather is another bunker that they actually will keep what they call, it's kind of like a secondary government. If anything would ever happen to our government, there is another government completely unelected down there. There is a president, there is a vice president. I believe that all of the political figures up here are mirrored down there. But again, they're unelected. And they have this in place for if anything ever happens. And yeah, it's operated by FEMA. So this is really something else that I encourage you to read about. And the fact is that we have stuff like this all over the place. And again, not just all over the country, but all over the world. And as I was looking into Mount Weather, I found this article, "The Deep State, the Unelected Shadow Government is Here to Stay." And it says, America's next president will inherit more than a bitterly divided nation teetering on the brink of financial catastrophe when he or she assumes office. This is from 2015, by the way. He will also inherit a shadow government, one that is fully operational and staffed by unelected officials who are, in essence, running the country. To be precise, however, the future president will actually inherit not one, but two shadow governments. That was my husband's phone, sorry. The first shadow government, referred to as COG, or continuity of government, is made up of unelected officials who have been appointed to run the government in the event of a catastrophe. So all of this is running underground at Mount Weather. The second shadow government, referred to as the deep state, is comprised of unelected government bureaucrats, corporations, contractors, paper pushers, and button pushers who are actually calling the shots behind the scenes right now. But what really, and I mean, I talk about the shadow government and secret government all the time, but really the continuity of government was, I had heard about it before, but I had actually forgotten about it. And I find that to be very disconcerting to know that there is a whole other government operating there at Mount Weather that has taken up each of the governmental positions, and it's already waiting for if something happens. And again, that the elite would be brought into Mount Weather and into these other places in case something would happen to keep them safe. Now that's where we're going to start talking about the inheritors, because I started to think about, what if something like this has happened before? We have all of these tunnels. It seems that the people, especially in the 19th century, but also much, much earlier, I should say, are obsessed. Well, they were obsessed with tunnels. Again, you find them everywhere. And I started to think more and more, we've been trying to decipher where all of these and where the inheritors came from. Like a lot of times, and if you don't know what the inheritors are, if you're not sure what the reset is, I encourage you to go back. I will leave a link to my Question the Narrative playlist. There's a video called Mud Flood, Reset, and Tartaria 101. And just watch that so you have a better understanding of what I'm talking about. But, you know, you see photos like this. I find this to be very creepy. These are nurses outside of, I believe it was a lunatic asylum. And so a lot of times we just wonder, where did these people come from? These are children that are from the orphan train. That's something, a topic for another day. This is also the orphan train. And yeah, so, and that was one idea, was when I talked about the millennial reign and the 1,000 years is the same thing. And then how after the 1,000 years were ended, the rest of the dead were resurrected. And that's why some people believe that that could have been the reset people. But I'm wondering if it could have been something very similar to what we already have in place today, where people could have possibly been kept underground. And this is very odd. They called this outdoors babies. I found this on Wikimedia Commons. And so, yeah, and then I remembered this story. It's a Hopi Indian legend, the Ant People of the Hopi. And I'm going to read it to you starting down here. One of the most intriguing Hopi legends involves the Ant People, who were crucial to the survival of the Hopi not just once but twice. The so-called First World, or World Age, was apparently destroyed by fire, possibly some sort of volcanism, asteroid strike, or coronal mass ejection from the sun. The Second World was destroyed by ice age glaciers, or a pole shift. During these two global cataclysms, the virtuous members of the Hopi tribe were guided by an odd-shaped cloud during the day and a moving star at night that led them to the sky god named Sotuknang, who finally took them to the Ant People. The Ant People then escorted the Hopi into subterranean caves where they found refuge and sustenance. So the Hopi legend is that the Ant People took them underground and saved them from these calamities. In this legend, the Ant People are portrayed as generous and industrious, giving the Hopi food when supplies ran short and teaching them the merits of food storage. In fact, another legend says that the reason why the ants have such thin waist today is because they once deprived themselves of provisions in order to feed the Hopi. So again, I will leave this link in the description box too if you want to read the whole thing. But how interesting is that here we have a world filled with tunnels underneath. We have bunkers for the elite in these grand hotels. We have Mount Weather with an underground government. All these places, they're filled with provisions to last people. It's almost like they're made to hold people during a reset and to house the elite, to house the chosen ones. Another thing that made me think of this was I just watched the movie 2012 for the first time the other day. So this is like, now this wasn't underground, but they put the people on what they called ships. And I think that they probably were inspired by Noah's Ark. But yeah, here they had the elite come on to these ships, or they also had people come who would be useful, who were able to do certain jobs. And could that possibly be where some of these reset people came from? And could it, I even started to think about the fact that in so many photos, it seems like they had the same person providing their clothing to them. So much of their clothing is all similar, same hats, a lot of times same skirts, same blouses, and it's almost like it was just handed off to them, like provided for them from someone. So so we have, and I showed you the orphan train photos. And, just the whole idea, these are actually, this was a picture of child laborers. And the whole thing struck me because a lot of these older photos, I could look at them for so long because they're so odd to me. They're so interesting, but they're so odd. Like, if these were child laborers, I just can't imagine that anybody would have cared to gather them all together to take a photo of them. But I don't know. I'm just thinking if there was something like this, like an underground bunker, or like when the Ant People saved the virtuous Hopi tribe, is that what these bunkers are for now? Are they to bring in these people, the ones that they want to move on for after the reset, the ones that they want to sustain? And is that why when we do see a lot of old photos, a lot of times people just seem very out of place, like they don't really know what they're doing. And we've talked about this before, like this one especially, this really gets me. It's almost like it's from a horror movie. But, it just makes you think. A lot of times we will say, well, how could these people have built this stuff? They've got a horse and buggies and look at these beautiful grand buildings. But if there was some sort of reset, where all of that technology was destroyed, and then these people were kept in these bunkers or something, and then they came out, they would be pretty much helpless. So I don't know, that's just another theory that I have. And you have to understand that these question the narrative videos that I do, they're kind of just like thought exercises for me. My brain is constantly going all the time, and I constantly have these what ifs running through my mind. And so this gives me an outlet to talk about them with other people who might have the same interests. So I'm never saying in these question the narrative videos that this is 100% what happened, or that I know that I'm right. These are just thoughts that I have, and things that I kind of tie together, and I think, could this possibly have happened that way? So anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.